Hey, what's going on YouTube? Just wanted to make a video today talking finally about the Mage and more specifically the Spellblade. So, in a fantasy kind of a world, I've always wanted to play a mage type character that uses swords, is up close and personal instead of using spells like they normally would. And this archetype really fits that sort of fantasy. So I wanted to share this build with you. It took me quite a while to sort of develop, but once it kind of got fleshed out and once I started to see how powerful it was, really became a staple for a lot of the content that I'm doing. So first, to start off with it, we're going to be playing the Spellblade. It is sort of like a melee, like I said, like a melee mage essentially. And we'll be using this set. Now, you could use a different weapon, different relic if you wanted to, but I always like to incorporate weird, quirky things into my build, sort of like items that I don't really see other players using. And I found that this was actually a very strong sort of a build. The reason why is because it's all based around cold damage. You get a bunch of health regen, and then on top of that, when you get even more health regen from that, you end up getting more melee cold damage, which just further increases the damage that you do. So you can either stack, melee cold damage, you could stack increased cold damage, or you can stack health regen, and those will all increase your damage even higher than what you might think it could do. So, for example, I've got 152. Let me take this off here. I've got 152 health regen per second. Now, what that means is I've got about 150% increased melee cold damage, right? And that's not counting the 72 I get from the weapon and the 93 I get from the weapon as well. So there's just a lot of different multipliers that help with this build to build its damage. Obviously, you want to do things like chill chance. You want to do things like frostbite chance. And then also just increasing general health and survivability, right? So jumping into this build, it was really exciting. Just learning about this sort of playstyle. Obviously, Flame Ward is a really big one. Flame Rush is another big one, but Shatterstrike is the meat and potatoes of everything that you'll be doing in this. Now, there's a couple of different builds that you can potentially do, but it will sort of change the playstyle a little bit more because you'll be using more mana to use it, right? So Whiteout is this talent that gets you, it recasts Shatterstrike after you initially cast it, so it casts it again, right? And you could do this twice. Now, the reason why I only have one slot in here is because I felt it was only necessary just to keep the pace moving. If you put two in here, it really lowers the attack speed, and you can really sort of tell you're kind of vulnerable for a couple of seconds, maybe 1 second. But that 1 second could mean the difference between, you surviving something or you not surviving something, right? So, I've got, points in here, just extra points into more damage, cold penetration, more damage, less attack speed for absolute 0, cold steel, which is probably the one thing that makes this so impactful, is you get 120% crit multiplier per equipped sword, right? So that's an extra 240% crit multiplier. And while I'm running around Empowered Monoliths, I've seen crits as high as like 69,000, 70,000, and I'm not even fully optimized, right? This is just to sort of show you guys how this build sort of plays and what the pros are, what the cons are, if you think this kind of build is for you, different things like that. So, yeah, jumping into, the skills that we have, we're going to start off with the main one being Shatterstrike. Now, initially, you don't have to really branch out too far from any of the other nodes, right? Global increased cold damage is wonderful. Freeze rate, damage in area. This is the whiteout that I was explaining earlier. More area, cold pen, right? Everything is enhancing the cold damage that you deal, right? The nice thing about this is that it sweeps. You'll see. I'll show you. It sweeps in front of you, both on the left side and the right side, which means you can hit twice when you overlap with both of these skills. Also a great thing about this is that it instantly kills enemies that are frozen below a certain health threshold, and I do believe this threshold does increase the later on that you go. So, obviously it's just all based around cold damage. So you can have, those gloves that you get from that apply a frostbite and things like that. You can use those sorts of items that increase your cold damage or give you more frostbite damage or more frostbite chances or things like that. So, yeah, this is the bread and butter. Like I said, it's going to be the one skill you're going to be using the most to do the most damage. Everything else is sort of supporting this sort of a build. Now, before I go into the other skills, I do want to mention that this build playstyle is sort of like a combo kind of a playstyle, right? And what I mean by combo is you attack, 1 time to 10 times maximum, and then you use Shatterstrike, and when you use Shatterstrike on that 10th one, you get a massive multiplier for the damage increased. And you'll see when I do the gameplay towards the end of the video. But you can really work with this however you want to. I found, in Empowered Monoliths, it was enough to just do about 3 attacks and then attack, and it was totally fine. It felt really good. I killed enemies in 1 or maybe 2 hits. The nice thing about Whiteout down here is that if you hit them once and they don't die, you're going to get another attack after that, which will increase the speed at which you're moving. It'll also increase damage that you're doing. There's a lot of benefits to this. So you can choose to put, 1 point more into this if you'd like to, if that's how you enjoy that sort of a playstyle. But I didn't really enjoy the 2 attacks because I felt like it was overkill, to be completely honest with you. So the next ability that we're going to go into is Flamebrand. Now, Flamebrand is probably a staple in a lot of Spellblade builds. The reason for this is because Incineration. Right, your next melee attack that is not Firebrand consumes all stacks of Firebrand and deals more damage, so 20% per stack. We also get 4% crit chance and 4% crit multiplier per stack consumed, and we can end up getting a grand total of 6 stacks with this Wildfire, which essentially equates to, a ton more damage when you're doing Shatterstrike. Now, it won't use this on other Firebrand hits. It won't use this on Flame Rush hits, and your Flame Ward does not hit targets directly. So the only time that you're going to be expending these stacks of Flamebrand is when you're going to be using Shatterstrike. Another thing to note is the stacks last longer with this, but Everflames is the one that you really are looking forward to. In Last Epoch, when you get a buff, it lasts a certain amount of time, and if you add another buff on top of that, it doesn't refresh the previous buff, right? With Everflames, it does. So you don't need to worry too much about keeping up those high number of stacks. Just make sure that you're constantly attacking so that you're always keeping those stacks refreshed. Because with this talent, it ends up getting the extra damage a lot faster. And you don't really have to worry too much about losing or having the stacks fall off. This one is great. Firebrand with Fulmination makes it so that you attack faster, which is wonderful. Means you build up that combo a lot faster. And there's also a talent in the passive tree that also kind of synergizes very well with this. So the next one we're going to go into is Enchant Weapon. Now, Enchant Weapon is one of those items that you can really have a lot of different play styles around, right? You can make it fire if you want to build fire with this. Personally, I just stuck with the cold You don't have to have To the Bone or Icicle Strike. You can invest those talents into Shivering Blade if you want to, or even go into Celerity, or a bunch of other different things here. Frostbrand, for example, is great. I felt like the Icicle was nice because it would go cross screen and hit other targets and then bring them to me, so I didn't have to run to them, which increases the Firebrand Incineration and the Illuminating Fire chances of you getting the max benefit of it. And then having the whiteout proc happen after you cast Shatterstrike is really nice for enchant weapon and things like that. So one thing to note here is getting efficacy pretty much means that your mana cost is 0, right? And if you get enough cooldown reduction with Kindling Blade, you can make it so that this buff is on you permanently, right? It essentially exactly what this says, right? Enchant weapon activates automatically once its cooldown expires. So you don't have to worry about casting it constantly, right? So the only downside with this is that you might be in a situation where you could really use the benefit of having the extra damage or the extra attack speed. But realistically, I liked having it constantly on me. I didn't want to have to worry about pushing another button in order to increase my damage. I just sort of thought of it like, every 10 seconds I'm getting a buff that lasts, 5 or 6 seconds, right? So there's only about a 4-second, 3-second cooldown in between that I'm not dealing the maximum damage. And then after that, it's back to square one, and I'm blowing things up. So our movement skill that we're going to be using is going to be Flame Rush. Now, I've tried a different number of things. I tried Teleport. Wasn't very offensive oriented. This is a lot more defensive oriented. You can choose to go into Teleport if you want to. You can even go into Surge, for example. I tried Surge, but I just couldn't find something that made it work. It didn't feel as good as Flame Rush. And Flame Rush also gives you a cold resistance shred, which is wonderful, right? More resistance shred that you have on enemies, the more damage you're going to be doing to them, especially bosses. And especially considering that we're going to be using Shatterstrike to, one-tap pretty much a lot of the enemies that we're going to be coming across. So, yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory with the points that I chose here. More speed. These Blazeborn are essentially the 3 points you can choose to put anywhere else. You can put, round this one out here. You can do... damage taken, double against dots, things like that. So there's a lot of benefits and a lot of wiggle room that you can put into Flame Rush when you're kind of building this out. If you've used Flame Rush in the past, you know what I'm talking about. You know that it's a very useful ability. It's off cooldown very quickly, and you're able to just zoom through maps and echoes using this. Finally, the last one we're going to go over is going to be Flame Ward. This is, I feel like, a staple in all of the Mage builds. Reason for this is because it gives a burst of ward. 3 seconds after, the hits deal 30% less damage to you, and you cause a retaliatory burst of flames. Now, those flames end up getting turned into cold damage. And that cold damage can freeze, and if you freeze enemies and you Shadow Strike them, you might be able to instantly kill them, right? So there's a lot of synergy with the Flame Ward. There's a lot of synergy with the Shatterstrike, with the Enchant Weapon, with the Flame Rush. There's just a ton of cold damage that you're doing to the enemy, and it's really, really nice. Two things that I want to point out is Dual Aegis is almost mandatory, considering you don't get extra cooldown timer with it. Obviously, this Fuel the Flames, but you do get ward granted. But there's no downside to choosing this, so it's very recommended that you choose this one. Now, I chose Astonish mainly because I always ran into situations where I was getting stunned from a large enemy, and the large enemy would stun me, I wouldn't be able to react, and then I would end up probably getting killed from an off-screen mob or something like that. This makes it so I don't really have to think too much about casting Flame Ward, right? If I'm going into a situation where, there's going to be a lot of damage coming out. I will activate it beforehand, and then, you know, after the Flame Ward is over, if I get stunned, boom, it'll activate it again for me. So I don't have to really think too much about that sort of a thing. So that's pretty much the build that I've designed here, and we can just kind of show you basically how it kind of functions, right? So as you can see, you know, Enchant Weapon is being used there. You can see my timer here. It finished 1, 2, so about 2 seconds of downtime that I have, right? If I got more cooldown reduction, I could totally make it work a little bit easier, but just to make it short and simple, let's kind of go through how this works. Now, you see at the bottom the numbers appearing. And the reason for those numbers is this talent down here, Blade Weaver. So when you use a melee attack that costs less than 10 mana, you gain a stack of Blade Weaving. Let me kill this dude here to explain so he doesn't kill me while I'm talking. And then when you use a melee attack that costs 10 or more mana, the stacks are consumed, and the attack deals 15% more elemental damage per stack consumed. Right? So on top of that, you have this as well, which increases your elemental damage with high-cost melee attacks, 10 or more mana, by 150%, and it stacks. Right? So you get an extra 300 when you're at 10 stacks, an extra 300% more damage, and it's just massive with everything that you're doing. So we build up a little bit of these stacks at the bottom. You can see it goes up to like 3 or 4 most times. The Firebrand stacks with it, so you're getting like double damage. That's why I kind of call this a combo, because you have to build these stacks early if you want to do good damage. Now, another really useful affix is to get attack speed. The more attack speed you have, the faster you can build up your combo, the more damage you can do, and you just can go crazy like this. Now, one thing to know is having the cold resistance shred is that's what I like to do right there. Is I like to flame rush through the enemy, turn around, and then swipe them with Shatterstrike. Before I flame rush, I try to get the maximum stacks that are necessary, so that way I don't have to worry about, you know, stopping halfway through and then using that Shatterstrike in order to maximize the damage output. But see, you can just spam Shatterstrike if you want to, but it does drain your mana pretty quickly. So, you know, if you wanted to have, for example, a lot of mana regen, you could definitely make it work, right? You're not going to be doing nearly enough, like a lot of good damage because of the combos. But honestly, it's not really going to matter because you're going to be freezing enemies often. You know, you're going to be moving around the battlefield a lot. So it just makes it seem like it's a lot of a smoother type of a build. Right? You can see the extra attack that happens right there really kind of helps for clearing out these larger mobs. And that's, I mean, that's a very basic sort of run that I just went through, but that's essentially what you'll be doing when you create this build. Now, I just want to say thank you for all the love, all the support. I really appreciate everything you guys have done, watching videos, subscribing, commenting. It really helps me out, helps my channel out a lot. And before I go, I just want to say that this has been a really fun build to sort of get my hands on. I've always, like I said at the start of the video, I've always wanted to make this sort of like melee kind of centered build, and this really hits on all those points. Now, there's a lot of different other ways you could play this. You could play this making like a lightning sort of a build. You can make this with like a flame reave sort of a build. So there's a lot of different ways you can make this, right? I decided to go cold because I felt that was the best decision, and also because Shatterstrike is really overpowered. So thank you guys. Appreciate you guys watching me. Appreciate everything, all the comments, everything. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.